Clara had lived on her small ranch in Montana all her life. The ranch was nestled between two low hills with wide fields stretching far into the distance. She could see the mountains from her porch, and each morning, she would watch the sunrise paint the sky in orange and pink. Life on the ranch was simple but hard. There were days when the wind would blow so fiercely that it rattled the doors and windows, and snow would pile high in the yard, making it difficult to leave the house. Yet Clara never complained. She had grown up helping her father, learning to feed the cattle, repair the fences, and tend to the garden. Every corner of the ranch held memories of her childhood, of lessons learned, and of long days spent under the sun. After her father passed, Clara became the sole keeper of the ranch. It was a lonely life, but she did not mind it at first. She found comfort in the rhythm of chores, the clatter of the barn doors, the smell of hay, the warmth of the kitchen in winter. She would rise with the sun, milk the cows, and sweep the floor. She took pride in every small task, and the ranch remained neat, organized, and alive under her care. Yet even as she worked tirelessly, a quiet loneliness lingered in her heart. Over the years, many men had come to the ranch to ask for her hand in marriage. Some were neighbors from nearby farms, some were travelers passing through town, and one even came from the county seat, claiming to have heard about her beauty and kindness. They would arrive with smiles, hats in hand, and words full of charm. They would talk about marriage, about shared life, about running the ranch together, but Clara would listen quietly and smile politely. She refused each one. None of them had seen her for who she truly was. They spoke of love quickly, as if it were something to be bought or promised without understanding the depth it required. They looked at her land, at the house, at the chores she performed as though she were a prize to be claimed. But Clara had learned to look beyond appearances to read hearts. She had learned that love was more than words, more than fleeting excitement. It was quiet, patient, and honest. She could not give her life to someone who would not wait for the real her, who would not understand her dreams, her fears, and her quiet joys. Evenings on the ranch were the hardest. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky with streaks of red and gold, Clara would sit on her porch and listen to the soft whispers of the wind through the trees. The fields would sway, and the cattle would settle down for the night. She would breathe in the cold, clean air and feel the weight of the day lifting from her shoulders. Sometimes she imagined what it would be like to have someone to share these quiet moments with. Not someone who spoke of love only in words, but someone whose presence alone could make the silence warm. Despite the loneliness, Clara never gave up hope. She did not seek comfort from strangers or fleeting passions. She did not fall for charm or promises of wealth. She waited patiently, knowing that life would eventually bring someone who would see her heart before her hands. She believed in a kind of love that was real and enduring, the kind that could grow quietly over time. Like the grass in her fields or the flowers in her garden, her days were filled with routine, yet there was a sense of peace in her solitude. She would wake early and feed the chickens, their clucking filling the barn with life. She would gather eggs, wash them carefully, and set them aside for the morning meals. She would water the garden, pruning the vegetables and flowers with careful hands, whispering encouragement to the plants as though they could hear her. She would repair fences that had fallen in the wind, painting and hammering until her fingers ached. But her heart felt full in the satisfaction of her work. Sometimes, travelers would stop by the ranch and Clara would offer them a meal or a warm place to rest. She had a natural kindness, a gentle patience that drew people in. They would speak of their journeys, of towns they had visited, and Clara would listen intently, learning about the world beyond the hills she had always known. But even as she enjoyed these brief encounters, her heart remained hers alone. She would not let it wander toward anyone who did not understand her, who could not wait, who could not see the quiet strength she carried within her. The townsfolk often spoke of her in admiration. They said she was beautiful, with dark hair that shone in the sun and eyes that reflected the endless sky. They spoke of her skill with the animals and her cleverness in managing the ranch. Many men tried to win her favor, bringing small gifts or writing letters of affection, but Clara remained steadfast. She appreciated the gestures but did not let them sway her heart. She wanted more than admiration. She wanted understanding, honesty, and the kind of companionship that could endure the long winters and harsh summers of Montana. On clear nights, when the stars filled the sky and the air was crisp and still, Clara would step outside and look up at the universe. She felt small in the vastness but not insignificant. She imagined someone out there, perhaps miles away, who shared her hopes and dreams, someone who would understand the quiet joy of tending to a garden, the satisfaction of a well-fed herd, and the comfort of a simple, honest life. She hoped that someday he would find her, not because she was beautiful or skilled, but because he could see the soul she carried in her heart, even in the coldest winters. When snow piled high and the wind howled through the trees, Clara never gave in to despair. She would sit by the fire in the evening, sipping tea, reading old letters from friends and neighbors, and dreaming quietly. She believed that patience was not just waiting, but living fully while waiting. She tended to the ranch, to the animals, and to herself. She knew that love was not about rushing, about filling empty spaces with fleeting excitement. It was about finding the right person, the one who would come and stay, not out of obligation, but because they understood her in a way no one else could. Though many had tried and failed to win her heart, Clara did not close it entirely. She knew the heart could be gentle yet strong, capable of great patience and endurance. She carried hope quietly, a steady flame that refused to be extinguished by disappointment. And so she continued, rising with the sun, working with her hands, and living her days with a quiet dignity. She did not hurry. She did not rush toward love. She knew that the right person would come, drawn not by the ranch or her beauty or her skill, but by the truth she held in her heart. And as the seasons changed, spring flowers giving way to summer blooms, summer turning to autumn, and autumn fading into winter, Clara remained steadfast. She refused every suitor, every offer, every promise that did not feel right. She waited with patience, hope, and a quiet belief that one day, someone would arrive who could see her for who she truly was. Someone who would understand her heart, share her dreams, and find joy not just in her land or her work, but in the very soul that had waited so long for him. Clara woke early that morning, as she did every day, and walked outside into the crisp spring air. The sun had not fully risen, but its soft light touched the valley, coloring the hills in shades of gold and green. She took a deep breath and looked at the small cabin she had called home for years. It was modest, with wooden beams that had darkened over time and a small garden that she tended carefully each season. The winters had been long and the work had been hard, but it was hers. Every corner held a memory, from the old rocking chair in the corner to the tiny flower patch beside the porch where she had planted bluebells in her father's memory. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the steam rising into the cool morning air. As she sipped, her eyes wandered to the mailbox at the edge of the property. It had been weeks since she last received a letter, and though she tried not to let her heart hope too much, a small part of her always did. Today, as she walked over to it, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. The mailbox had a new letter inside, its envelope a soft cream color, sealed carefully and addressed in neat handwriting. Clara took it gently in her hands and felt the paper beneath her fingers. Sitting on the porch, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was careful and steady, each word placed with thought. It was Samuel's letter. Her heart beat faster as she read the first lines where he described the small town in Kansas where he lived. He wrote about the streets lined with oak trees and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery every morning. Samuel told her about the library where he worked and how he enjoyed reading the books he borrowed from the children who came there. He shared stories of his daily life, simple and honest, full of small joys that made her smile. Clara read about his mother's garden, where bright sunflowers and sweet-smelling roses grew. He wrote about how he had learned to care for plants from her, and how he wished to have a small garden of his own one day, full of colors and life. Clara imagined him kneeling in the dirt, planting seeds and talking to the plants as if they were friends. She smiled, feeling warmth spreading in her chest, a feeling she had not known for a long time. In the letter, Samuel also spoke of hardships. He had lost his job at the mill and struggled to find steady work. His tone was honest, without complaints, just the truth of life as he saw it. He described the loneliness of his evenings and how he wished for a companion to share quiet moments, someone who could listen and understand without judgment. Clara could feel the sincerity in his words. There was no pride, no pretense, only a man sharing his life honestly. She continued reading, and Samuel spoke about his dreams. He dreamed of living on a small farm, far from the noise and rush of the towns. He wished to wake up each morning to the sun rising over the fields and to work with his hands, building a life that was simple but full of meaning. He spoke of wanting someone to share it with, someone who valued honesty, kindness, and quiet strength. Clara's fingers tightened around the letter. The words seemed to reach through the paper, touching her heart in ways she had not expected. For the rest of the day, Clara could hardly focus on her chores. She fed the animals, swept the floors, and tended the garden, but her mind kept returning to Samuel's words. She imagined what it would be like to meet him, to speak with him face to face, to hear his voice. She wondered if he looked as kind as he sounded, if his eyes reflected the honesty she felt in his letters. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The idea of meeting someone new after years of refusing every suitor was both thrilling and frightening. Days turned into weeks, and the letters kept coming. Each one revealed more about Samuel's life, his thoughts and his feelings. He wrote about the small joys he found in the world, the laughter of children in the street, the songs of birds in the morning, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. He also shared his fears and uncertainties, the worries about not finding work or not being able to create the life he dreamed of. Clara read every word carefully, savoring the honesty and the emotion behind them. One afternoon, as she read another letter, Clara realized something had changed within her. She no longer felt the same hesitation she had felt with past suitors. There was a calmness, a certainty that she could not ignore. Samuel's letters were not just words on paper. They were pieces of his soul, shared openly and without expectation. She felt connected to him even though they had never met. A small, quiet hope began to grow in her heart, a hope she had not allowed herself to feel for many years. Clara decided to write back with care. She told Samuel about her daily life on the ranch, the work she did, and the simple pleasures she found in each day. She spoke of the animals she cared for, the small garden she tended, and the quiet beauty of the valley where she lived. She did not embellish or try to impress. She wrote honestly, sharing her thoughts and feelings as they came. She told him about the evenings she spent on the porch, watching the stars and thinking about the future, wondering if it might one day include someone like him. Weeks passed, and the letters became a lifeline for both of them. They shared dreams, fears, and stories from their pasts. Clara learned that Samuel had a quiet sense of humor, the kind that made her smile even when he was telling a serious story. He wrote about the books he loved, the songs he remembered from his childhood, and the small moments of beauty he found in everyday life. Clara felt herself laughing aloud as she read, the sound carrying across the quiet valley. Through these letters, Clara began to imagine a life with Samuel. She imagined walking through the fields together, sharing meals at the small wooden table in her cabin, and sitting by the fire on cold evenings, talking quietly about their days. She pictured the simple joys they might share, and the comfort of having someone who understood her. The more she read his words, the more she realized that she was no longer waiting for just anyone. She was waiting for him. One day, Clara received a letter that made her pause. Samuel wrote that he would be traveling west to meet her in person. He described the journey he would take and how nervous he felt about meeting someone he had only known through letters. Clara's hands shook as she held the paper. The idea of seeing him for the first time was both exciting and frightening. She wondered what he would think of her, if he would like the ranch or if he would regret the journey once he arrived. In the days leading up to Samuel's arrival, Clara prepared the ranch with care. She cleaned the cabin thoroughly, tended the garden, and even baked bread to welcome him. Each task she completed was filled with anticipation, a mix of nervous energy and hope. She found herself thinking about him constantly, imagining how he might look and sound, and wondering if the connection they had through letters would feel the same in person. Finally, the day came. Clara walked to the edge of the property, waiting for the mail wagon that would bring him from the station. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. She carried a small basket of food, the letters from Samuel tucked safely in her pocket. As the wagon approached, she saw a figure step down carrying a worn suitcase. Samuel. He looked around nervously, his eyes scanning the ranch, and then they met. Clara felt a jolt of recognition, a sense that all the months of letters and dreams had led to this moment. Samuel smiled a little awkwardly, and Clara felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She realized that the letters had been more than words. They had been a bridge between two hearts, and now, finally, they were about to meet. Clara stepped forward, her hand extended, and Samuel took it gently. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet of the valley surrounded them, the wind rustling the leaves, the birds singing softly. And in that silence, they both understood something important. The connection they had built through letters was real, and it had brought them to this moment for a reason. As they walked together toward the cabin, talking softly, Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. The letters had been a promise, a story unfolding slowly, and now that story was coming to life. She knew that challenges lay ahead, that life on the ranch would not always be easy. But she also knew that with Samuel, she could face them all. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch, drinking tea and sharing stories. They laughed, they shared dreams, and they felt the quiet joy of two people discovering each other for the first time. The valley, once quiet and lonely, seemed to hum with life as if it, too, recognized the beginning of something special. And so, through letters written with care, through words shared honestly and openly, Clara and Samuel began a journey together. It was a journey of trust, hope, and love, built not on grand gestures but on the small, meaningful moments that make life rich. Clara knew that the letters would remain precious to her, a reminder of the time when hope blossomed quietly in the pages of a letter, bringing two hearts together across the distance. The morning of Samuel's arrival was filled with an unusual stillness. The sun had just begun to rise over the hills, casting a golden glow on the fields and the small ranch that Clara called home. Birds chirped softly in the trees, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. Clara stood at the edge of the porch, her hands folded tightly in front of her, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had imagined this moment for weeks, months even, and now it was finally here. The distant sound of hooves approached, followed by the creak of wheels on the rough path. Clara's eyes scanned the horizon and she saw the mail wagon coming up the hill. Her breath caught in her throat. Samuel was inside. After all the letters, the shared dreams, the stories of daily life and quiet hopes, he was finally here in person. The wagon stopped at the edge of the property, and the driver helped a man step down. Clara's heart leapt as she saw him. Samuel carried a small, worn suitcase, his clothes simple but neat. He looked around the ranch with wide, curious eyes, taking in the wooden fences, the small garden, and the modest cabin that had been Clara's home for so long. Then his gaze met hers. For a long moment, neither moved nor spoke. Clara felt as if time had stopped. Every worry, every doubt, every fear melted away. She saw in his eyes the same mixture of hope and nervousness that she felt herself. Samuel took a tentative step forward, and Clara felt her pulse quicken. She smiled gently and nodded toward him, inviting him to come closer. He smiled back, but it was a nervous, almost trembling smile. Clara could see the lines of fatigue on his face, the result of the long journey from Kansas. Yet beneath that tiredness was a warmth, a gentleness that seemed to reach out to her even across the short distance between them. As Samuel stepped nearer, he suddenly stopped and covered his face with his hands. Clara froze, unsure what to do. The wind rustled the trees, and the silence was broken only by the distant sound of birds and the creak of the wagon. Slowly, Samuel lowered his hands and tears were visible in his eyes. He looked at Clara again, his voice shaking slightly as he whispered, I never imagined you... Clara's heart softened. She stepped forward slowly, keeping her movements calm and gentle. It's all right, she said softly. You're here now. Samuel's lips trembled and he let out a quiet sob, the kind of cry that comes from deep within a person, from a heart overwhelmed with emotion. Clara felt a lump in her throat as she realized how deeply his journey, his hope, and his trust had touched him. Samuel lowered his hands and looked at her fully for the first time. His eyes were bright with tears, but there was also a light in them, a recognition of something he had longed for. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and said, You look just like someone I've never forgotten. Someone who made a difference in my life long ago. Someone who taught me kindness when I needed it most. Clara's heart ached with curiosity and empathy. She asked quietly, Who was that? He shook his head slowly, tears still shining in his eyes. It doesn't matter, he said. What matters is that you are here, and I am finally here too. I've waited for this moment for a long time. Clara's hands itched to reach out to him, to offer comfort, and finally she did. She placed her hand lightly on his arm. Samuel looked at her. startled at first, but then he relaxed slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing as if her touch had been exactly what he needed. They began walking toward the cabin together, Samuel carrying his small suitcase and Clara leading the way. The conversation was quiet at first, broken by smiles and soft laughter. Samuel spoke of his journey, describing the towns and landscapes he had seen along the way, and Clara listened, captivated. She told him about the animals, the fields, and the small routines of ranch life. Every word built a bridge between them, connecting the months of letters to this very real, very present moment. As they approached the cabin, Samuel paused and looked around. "This place, it's even more beautiful than I imagined," he said softly. Clara smiled. "It has its challenges, but it's home," she replied. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Life on a ranch was not easy, but it was honest, and he could see that Clara's strength and resilience had shaped every corner of this place. Inside the cabin, Clara showed Samuel around. He admired the simplicity, the careful way she had kept everything in order. He noticed the small flower patch outside the window, the rocking chair that had seen so many quiet evenings, and the little details that told the story of Clara's life. Every corner of the cabin spoke of her patience, her hard work, and her dedication. Samuel looked at her with admiration, realizing that this was a woman of substance, someone whose life had been filled with challenges she faced with grace. They sat together at the small wooden table, sharing a meal that Clara had prepared in anticipation of his arrival. The food was simple, but the warmth and care with which it was made added a richness that no fancy meal could have matched. They talked softly, sharing stories from their pasts, their hopes for the future, and the small, seemingly ordinary things that made life meaningful. Clara felt herself relaxing, feeling a sense of peace she had not known for a long time. As the day turned to evening, Samuel and Clara stepped outside once more. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. The fields glowed in the soft light, and the wind carried the scent of flowers and fresh earth. They stood together side by side, watching the day end. Samuel's hand brushed against Clara's, and without thinking, she reached out to hold it. He looked at her and smiled, the tears of earlier replaced by a quiet joy, a happiness that came from finding something long sought but never thought possible. They spoke of the letters that had brought them together, laughing softly at the awkwardness and excitement of their first exchanges. Clara admitted that she had been hesitant to answer at first, unsure if anyone could be truly honest and kind. Samuel confessed that he had worried too, wondering if the person behind the letters would match the words on the page. Yet here they were together, and the connection they had built in writing had become even stronger in person. That night, they sat on the porch, listening to the quiet of the valley. The stars emerged slowly, one by one, until the sky was dotted with countless points of light. They spoke softly about the future, imagining the days and years to come. Clara realized that the letters had not just been words. They had been a promise, a bridge, and a foundation for the life they were beginning together. Samuel's presence, his honesty, and his gentle nature reassured her that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with hope and companionship. Clara could feel the weight of her past hesitations lifting. The suitors she had refused seemed distant now, irrelevant in comparison to the man who had traveled so far, who had shared his heart through words, and who now stood beside her, real and present. She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet happiness that had nothing to do with grand gestures and everything to do with simple truth and connection. Samuel, too, felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had journeyed for days to reach this place, uncertain of what he would find. Yet in Clara's presence he felt a peace he had never known. The ranch, the simple cabin, the rolling fields, and the quiet evenings, they were not obstacles, but the very life he had hoped to build. And in Clara he had found not just a companion, but a partner, someone who shared his values and dreams. As the first stars shone brightly above, Clara and Samuel sat quietly, letting the moment settle around them. There was no rush, no need for grand declarations or immediate plans. The letters had taught them patience, the value of honesty, and the importance of shared dreams. And now, in the calm of the evening, they understood that their journey together was just beginning, one small, meaningful step at a time. Clara realized that Samuel's tears earlier had not been a sign of weakness, but a reflection of the deep human capacity to feel and hope. And Samuel understood that Clara's quiet strength, her patience, and her honesty had created a home not just for him but for both of them. Together they watched the night settle over the valley, knowing that the bond formed through words, trust, and shared hope was a beginning that would last a lifetime. The days after Samuel's arrival were filled with quiet routines and shared tasks that slowly brought him and Clara closer. Each morning, Clara rose with the sun, tending to the animals in the garden while Samuel followed, learning the rhythms of ranch life. At first, he moved cautiously, aware of his weak leg and unfamiliarity with the chores, but Clara encouraged him gently, showing him how to feed the chickens, mend fences, and carry water from the well. Each task they did together created a rhythm, a dance of two people learning to live side by side. Samuel often paused to watch Clara work. He admired her strength, her dedication, and the way she moved with a quiet confidence that made every action seem purposeful. Clara noticed his attentiveness but never felt embarrassed or pressured. Instead, she felt a growing trust in him, a reassurance that he would not demand more than she could give. She began to see him as a partner, someone who could share the weight of work, someone whose presence made the chores lighter and the days brighter. Evenings were the most precious part of the day. After a long day in the fields or tending to the animals, they would sit on the porch, sharing a simple meal and talking about their days. Samuel would recount small details about the places he had seen on his journey, the kindness of strangers, and the beauty he noticed in everyday life. Clara shared stories of her past, of growing up on the ranch and the quiet moments that had shaped her life. Their conversations were never rushed or forced. They learned the value of listening, of understanding the unspoken, and of finding comfort in silence as much as in words. As the weeks passed, Samuel found ways to contribute more actively to the ranch. He built new fences to replace old broken ones, repaired the barn roof, and cleared a small patch of land for a new garden. His hands, though not as strong as Clara's, worked with careful attention. Each nail hammered, each board placed, was a sign of his commitment. Clara watched him with admiration, recognizing not just the effort but the care he put into everything. It was clear he wanted to be a part of this life, not just as a visitor but as someone who belonged. There were moments of struggle, as there always are when two people are learning to live together. Samuel's leg sometimes gave him pain, making certain tasks difficult or slow. Clara worried that he might feel discouraged or that the townsfolk would notice and judge. But Samuel never complained. He accepted her guidance, worked within his limits, and celebrated the progress they made together. In turn, Clara felt a renewed sense of hope and pride. She realized that true partnership was not about perfection or speed. It was about honesty, effort, and willingness to support one another. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the garden, Samuel paused and wiped sweat from his brow. "Clara," he said, "I never imagined I could feel so content. Even with the hard work, the long days, I've never felt this alive." Clara smiled, her heart warmed by his words. She reached out and touched his arm lightly. "It's the place and it's the people. And you've brought something here too," she said. Samuel looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and humility. He understood that she meant more than just his physical presence. He had brought hope, laughter, and a renewed sense of purpose to her life. As the days turned into weeks, the ranch began to thrive. The new garden produced fresh vegetables, the fences held strong against storms, and the animals were healthier and happier. Clara noticed how Samuel took pride in the small successes, how he smiled when a task was completed correctly, and how he laughed freely when mistakes were made. Their shared work created not just a functional ranch, but a home filled with energy, life, and love. Samuel often wrote letters to the postman who had connected them, expressing gratitude for the chance that had brought him to Clara. In his letters, he described the life they were building together, the joy he found in simple work, and the deep respect he felt for Clara. She sometimes read the letters aloud, smiling at the thought that their bond, once formed on paper, had grown into a living, breathing reality. The townsfolk began to notice the changes too. Clara's ranch, once quiet and unremarkable, now stood out as a place of activity and life. Neighbors would stop by, admiring the garden, the new fences, and the evident happiness of the couple. Some asked questions, curious about the man who had arrived from Kansas and how he fit into Clara's life. She answered simply, Speaking of honesty, kindness, and shared effort, Samuel too met the neighbors with humility, introducing himself politely and sharing the small details of his life. Slowly, he became a part of the community, respected and liked by those around him. Evenings continued to be a time of connection. After the work was done, they would sit on the porch watching the sun dip below the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold. Samuel would speak of dreams for the future, perhaps expanding the garden, planting more trees, or raising new animals. Clara would share her own ideas, and together they would plan, always considering one another's thoughts and feelings. These moments were filled with laughter, quiet reflection, and a growing understanding that life was richer when shared. One particularly warm afternoon, as the sun shone brightly overhead, Samuel suggested they take a break and walk along the edge of the property. They wandered slowly, hands brushing, talking about the memories they had made and the moments they hoped to create. Samuel stopped and looked at Clara with a seriousness that made her heart skip a beat. "I know life is not always easy, and there will be challenges ahead," he said. "But I want you to know that I am here. I will work beside you, face the hard times with you, and share every joy." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, moved by his sincerity. She nodded, understanding that he was not just speaking words but making a promise she could trust. As spring turned to summer, the ranch grew more vibrant. Flowers bloomed in the garden, vegetables flourished, and the animals thrived. Samuel's presence brought a new energy to the place, and Clara felt a sense of fulfillment she had not known before. She realized that refusing the previous suitors had not been about pride or stubbornness. It had been about waiting for someone who truly belonged, someone whose heart matched hers. And Samuel, with his quiet strength, honesty, and care, was that person. Even the quiet nights became moments of connection. After the work was done, they would sit by the fireplace, sharing stories of their pasts, hopes for the future, and dreams they had yet to realize. Samuel would recount tales of his childhood, of the small town he came from and the lessons he had learned from his family. Clara shared her own stories, of growing up on the ranch, the hard winters, and the moments of beauty she had found in everyday life. Together they built a shared history, one that blended their pasts into a future they would face together. Occasionally, challenges arose that tested their patience and resolve. There were days when the heat was too intense or when the work seemed endless, but they faced these moments together, offering encouragement, support, and laughter. Each difficulty strengthened their bond, showing them that partnership was not about avoiding hardship but about navigating it together. Clara marveled at how Samuel never complained, how he approached each problem with thoughtfulness and determination. In him, she found not just a helper but a companion who respected her, understood her, and valued her. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the hills, Samuel turned to Clara and said softly, "I have never known a place where I felt so at home, where every moment feels meaningful. Thank you for letting me be a part of this life." Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the sky. "And thank you for bringing your heart here. You've made this place brighter, happier, and more alive." They held hands, feeling the quiet certainty of a life built together, a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and love. Through these months, Clara realized something profound. She had waited not for perfection, not for wealth or status, but for honesty, kindness, and a shared commitment. Samuel had shown her that life could be hard and beautiful at the same time, and that joy often came from the simplest of actions: sharing a meal, mending a fence, tending a garden, or simply sitting together in silence. She felt gratitude for every letter, every word, and every moment that had led to this day. As summer gave way to autumn, the ranch continued to thrive, and so did their relationship. Samuel and Clara had learned to work together, to support one another, and to find joy in ordinary life. They laughed, they planned, and they grew together, discovering that true partnership was built on effort, understanding, and shared dreams. The love between them was not loud or dramatic. It was steady, quiet, and enduring, the kind that could weather storms and celebrate sunlight alike. And so, life on the ranch continued, filled with work, laughter, quiet reflection, and the deep, unspoken bond between two people who had found each other not by chance, but by honesty, patience, and a shared heart. Samuel had come to Montana as a stranger, but he had become a part of Clara's life, a partner in every sense of the word. Together, they faced the future with hope, determination, and the knowledge that, whatever came their way, they would face it side by side. The years passed quietly on the ranch, and with each passing season, the life that Clara and Samuel had built together grew stronger and more beautiful. Spring brought new blooms to the garden. Summer filled the fields with golden light, and autumn painted the hills in shades of amber and red. Clara and Samuel worked side by side, their days filled with the rhythm of labor, laughter, and shared moments of quiet reflection. The simple life they had dreamed of in letters had become a reality, and every small task and every shared meal strengthened their bond. Samuel had become more confident in his work, learning new skills and taking on tasks that once seemed impossible. Clara watched him with pride and admiration, realizing that the man who had arrived shy and unsure had grown into a strong, dependable partner. He took care of the animals with gentle hands, repaired fences that had long needed attention, and tended the garden with the same care and love that Clara had always shown. Their teamwork was seamless, each understanding the other's rhythms and methods. Even the townsfolk began to speak of them as a model of cooperation and dedication, admiring how two people could create something so meaningful together. Evenings were still their favorite time of day. After the work was done, they would sit on the porch drinking tea or coffee, watching the sun set over the hills. The golden light reflected off the fields, casting long shadows and illuminating the small details of the ranch. The flowers in the garden, the wooden fences, and the cabin that had been Clara's home for so many years. Samuel often spoke of the future, imagining ways to improve the ranch, plant more crops, and create a life that was even more abundant. Clara listened, contributing her own ideas, and together they planned, always considering one another's thoughts and dreams. There were times when life challenged them. Storms would sweep across the valley, bringing heavy rain and strong winds that damaged fences and flooded parts of the garden. Illness occasionally touched the animals, and there were days when the work seemed never-ending. But through it all, Samuel and Clara faced each challenge together. They never blamed one another or lost patience. Instead, they supported each other, shared the burdens, and celebrated every small victory. Each difficulty they overcame became a testament to their partnership, a proof that their bond was strong enough to withstand the trials of life. One crisp autumn morning, Clara walked to the mailbox as she had done so many times before. Among the usual letters and notices, she found a small envelope with familiar handwriting. It was from Samuel, though this time it had been left on the porch after a long walk in the woods. She opened it carefully, and inside was a note expressing his love and gratitude, recounting the memories they had shared and the dreams they still hoped to fulfill. Clara felt tears of joy prick her eyes. The letter was a reminder that even after years together, the foundation of their relationship, the honesty, trust, and care they had nurtured, remained strong. Samuel, too, reflected often on the life they had built. He remembered the first time he stepped off the wagon at the edge of the ranch, nervous and unsure, overwhelmed by the reality of meeting Clara in person. He recalled the moment he had cried, overcome by emotion, and how her calm, understanding presence had comforted him. He realized that those first moments had set the tone for everything that followed, a tone of honesty, patience, and mutual respect. He had never thought a simple ranch in Montana could become the home of his dreams, but Clara had made it so. Their bond deepened as they shared even the smallest joys. Samuel loved to watch Clara as she worked in the garden, her hands covered in soil, her hair catching the sunlight. Clara found comfort in Samuel's quiet laughter when a task went wrong, or when an animal behaved unexpectedly. They found delight in cooking together, in sharing meals they had prepared with care, and in sitting on the porch listening to the soft sounds of the valley. These small moments, simple and ordinary, were what made their life extraordinary. As the seasons continued to turn, Clara and Samuel began to reflect on the journey that had brought them together. She thought of all the suitors she had once refused, realizing that each rejection had led her to this moment, to the man who had shared his heart through letters and then through presence and action. Samuel reflected on his own journey, grateful for the courage it had taken to write those first letters and to travel across states to meet a woman he had never seen in person. They understood that fate had not merely brought them together, it had guided them with careful patience, shaping their paths until they aligned perfectly. One winter evening, as snow blanketed the valley in quiet white, Samuel and Clara sat by the fireplace, sipping tea and listening to the crackling of the flames. The warmth of the fire contrasted with the cold outside, a perfect reflection of the life they had created together. A safe haven built on trust, love, and shared effort. Samuel reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "We've built something wonderful here," he said softly. "Not just the ranch, but this life, these moments. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Clara smiled, squeezing his hand in return. "Neither would I," she replied. Spring returned, as it always did, bringing new life to the valley. The garden bloomed once more, the fields turned green, and the animals thrived. Clara and Samuel continued their routines, their partnership stronger than ever. They celebrated small achievements: the first flowers of spring, the harvest of the garden, the repair of a fence that had long needed attention. Each success was shared and appreciated, a reflection of the care and effort both had invested in every aspect of their lives. Their love deepened in quiet, consistent ways. Clara realized that happiness was not found in grand gestures but in simple consistency. A shared meal, a kind word, a gentle touch, and the knowledge that someone was always there to support you. Samuel understood that true companionship was not about dramatic declarations, but about presence, honesty, and the willingness to share both work and rest, joy and hardship. Together they created a rhythm that made life on the ranch rich, full, and meaningful. Years passed, and the ranch became a place of life, laughter, and memories. Samuel and Clara's partnership inspired those around them. The neighbors admired their dedication and the harmony they had created, and their story quietly spread throughout the valley. Children passing by would wave at them, and friends visiting for supplies would smile at the sight of the couple working together, side by side. Clara and Samuel became known not just for their work, but for the respect, trust, and love that was evident in everything they did. Even as they grew older, their connection remained strong. Samuel's hair grayed slightly, and Clara's hands bore the lines of years of work, but their hearts remained as young and hopeful as when they had first met. They continued to rise with the sun, care for the land, and celebrate the simple joys of daily life. Each morning brought with it the same sense of wonder and gratitude for the life they had built together. One evening, after a particularly beautiful sunset, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch in comfortable silence. The valley lay quiet before them, the fields golden in the fading light, and the wind carried the scent of flowers and fresh earth. Samuel turned to Clara and said softly, "I never thought I could find a life like this, a life filled with peace, happiness, and love. You've given me everything I could have hoped for." Clara smiled, her heart full. "And you've given me the same," she replied. "We've built it together." As the stars appeared in the sky, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The letters exchanged with care and hope, the first nervous meeting, the months of work and learning to live together, and the years of shared effort and joy. Clara realized that waiting for the right person had been worth every moment, every lonely day, and every hesitation. Samuel understood that the courage to reach out and the honesty in his letters had led him to a life more fulfilling than he had ever imagined. Their story was one of patience, trust, and the quiet power of love built through shared life and effort. They had faced challenges, endured hardships, and celebrated victories together, always supporting one another and finding joy in the simplest of moments. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, was now a home alive with love, laughter, and the warmth of two hearts committed to one another. And so, Clara and Samuel continued their lives together, side by side, facing each day with hope, gratitude, and the quiet certainty that they had found what they had both longed for. A true partnership, built not on wealth or appearance, but on honesty, kindness, and shared dreams. Their love was steady, enduring, and rich with meaning, a testament to the beauty of life when two people find each other and choose to build a world together, one day at a time. In the valley, the ranch remained as a symbol of dedication, hope, and love. Visitors and neighbors would often comment on how the place seemed alive with warmth and joy, and those who knew Clara and Samuel understood why. It was not just the land, the garden, or the animals. It was the bond between two people who had waited, searched, and finally found each other. And in that bond lay the heart of the story, a story that spoke of patience, honesty, and the quiet, enduring power of love. Even as years passed and time brought changes to the valley, Clara and Samuel's life remained a testament to the idea that true happiness is built